All right, good evening. So I'm basically going to show some clips and snippets of some very good debaters. And, I like watching good debaters like other debaters, when they can actually sit down and have conversation and talk without fucking, cutting each other off. Um, Now, I just recently stumbled across, another channel. Um, he's a Trump supporter. His name is like, what the fuck is his name? It's a new one I stumbled across. Hayden Rodia. He debates with that gentleman Parker Get a Job and Dean Withers. Parker and Dean. Sounds like the name of a movie. So we're going to watch some snippets of this, and then we're going to come back and talk about it. And it's basically stuff that I've said plenty of times, before. So let me share the, bear with me. Let me share the screen here. So I'm
But
Can you hear me?
yeah, Hayden, did you want to go ahead? You can critique my view or Dean's
Can
view.
I text Danny, or do you just want to talk to him?
I'm down to just talk to him.
About that. Kenyon, thank you for the $1 of my.
Okay, Parker, do you want to do the Trump thing, or do you want to actually like go over worldviews? Because I'm down to do either one.
Well, I'm down to just do the Trump thing if you want.
Okay, yeah, we can do that. You want me to
Sure.
start by saying why I voted for Trump, or do you want to start?
I could just ask you, like, do you want to give like a specific Trump economic policy you like of his that you think was good?
So I know I mentioned this yesterday. I mean, I'd say generally why I voted for him would be pro-life policies as well as just generally social conservative issues. So things like ending trans quote unquote healthcare for minors. So things like puberty blockers and gender affirming hormones, as well as just generally supporting more of a traditional view of the family than would be advocated for by Democrats.
see, yep, right there. This gentleman, Hayden is very on point. How far we've gone to the left to where we, said, hey, let's give them puberty blockers. Because you see on both sides of this fence, kids' minds are malleable. Their minds are very, very malleable. And just like any other animal species, higher up in the vertebrate food chain, we'll stick with birds and mammals. Because anything below birds, they don't learn from their parents. It's all instinctual. Even though in the case of many reptiles, like crocodilians in particular, they take care of their offspring, but their offspring already knows how to go hunt and eat some stuff. With birds, obviously, it has to be taught what to eat and all that. Regardless of species. Mammals, that's a definite given. Every species of mammal, the parent or parents, depending on the species, they have to teach their offspring, how to survive. And this is very true with humans. And unfortunately, with humans, a lot of times the parents fucked it up hardcore, and that's why we get into bad parenting. Makes bad offspring. And I'm not going to get into abuse versus discipline. That's a whole nother topic for another video. Let's get onward.
Do you have an economic policy that you think is good of Trump's?
I'd say in this election, I was probably less concerned with economic policy than I was social policy.
Okay, what's social policy?
Yeah, so like the ones that I just mentioned as far as transgenderism, abortion, and then sort of the pushing of what I would advocate as sexual perversion to children as well as adults.
Let me stop it right there. I have a reservation with Hayden's stance, but I've seen this on both sides of the political bird, left and right wing. Obviously, we all know Trump has said some perverted shit that if any other president said the same exact shit, they wouldn't be I don't think they would have even gotten in office. So it's almost like, why why do we nominate a candidate that knowingly has said some pretty perverse shit? Albeit it's in his way in the past before he thought about running. But you get my point. It's still out there. I'm not going to give any specific examples because that's going to require too much pointing and clicking, and I want to actually talk instead of pointing and clicking. Losing my train of thought, which is why my channel sucks. I lost a subscriber. Yippee! Probably one of my fake scammer subscribers, but anyhow, let's continue on. This is his side. This his side. Let's scroll and see what the comments actually say on this one. So that's another reason why I like to look at these, just to see how everybody hates each other, which is a bigger part of the fucking problem. Okay, so let's see what these. Okay, that's a bad example because it's all the same substance, water. Anyhow. Okay, videographer, gay sex on the basis of spreading disease, mass farming of animals, since, okay. So this gentleman is saying, or person, I don't know who's typing. They hate a guy who is respectful. I'm not seeing any hate here, no offense. Andrew Wilson, I don't know who that is, but I'll type in that name. So this is the this is with like all those debate channels is you have to do it. You have to turn it into a debate, not a fucking pissing contest. Okay, here's another one. That was 6 months ago. Charlie Kirk, too embarrassed. I watched that one, and that was pretty comical. I watched it on both channels, Charlie Kirk and Parker's channel, just to kind of see which side, because there's always two sides to every story. There's two sides to every debate. Well, in this case, the two on wanting him. So that's, a reservation. The live got banned. Okay. Okay, I guarantee this person probably not wrong. The chat doesn't even want him there. So, I mean, both of these people have good arguments for their side. Let's continue on.
Okay, so do you think that trans people should be banned from the military?
Should be banned from the military? I'd say probably, because I would consider gender dysphoria or gender identity disorder to be something that is a problem with the mind, up to the point where it actually causes someone to not have a proper view of reality. So
community guidelines, that was crazy. Okay, so yeah, I think that's
okay. Yep. Military, yeah, and this should be up to the military. Not up to the commander in chief, who was a draft dodger. Why should somebody who's never put his boots on dictate, who the military can and cannot take? It's the same as, lawmakers, passing laws. Actually, before I go off topic, let me stick to this. Lawmakers, passing topics like the puberty blockers, for kids and all that, when they don't even have a basic understanding of medicine, and this is true for both sides, left side, pushing it, thinking, oh yeah, it's going to work. Right. It's child abuse. When neither side really has a full understanding of the scope of, in this case, the puberty blockers for kids. They don't have I guarantee none of them have a basic biology degree, never mind a fucking medical degree. So, before you should be in a position to pass laws on ABC and XYZ, have a basic understanding how ABC and XYZ work. Again, I'm neither right nor left. I'm very symmetrical. I'm very central. I like to look at both sides, take a step back, and analyze things piece by piece. Now, yeah, I watch the Daily Wire guys. I've watched a number of Charlie Kirk's videos, and sure, yeah, do they say some controversial shit that I disagree with? Hell to the yeah. Do the people on the left also say some controversial shit that I disagree with? Hell to the yeah. But again, to the point of here, puberty blocks kids. The right wants to not do it. The left wants to overdo it. And while we're talking about, Lupron, for example, that's the most commonly mentioned one. We all know it's been used to chemically castrate sex offenders, and also for precocious puberty in what they call, cisgender kids. So we'll leave that one alone. But the question, that really needs to be, addressed is, what is the dosage given to either of the three subjects? I mean, obviously they're going to ramp it up for, the RSOs, the ones that did some bad shit. And so, yeah, that's probably those people, the sex offenders, they're probably going to get a higher dose than either cis or trans kid, for obvious reasons. But let's eliminate that. Let's focus on precocious puberty, trans kid. What dosages are being prescribed for each? And, again, this might tie into a side note, like we're basically turning our kids into fucking walking pharmacies. But is the dosage different, for a cis kid who has precocious puberty versus a trans kid, or is it the same? That's a question. That's a question that definitely needs an answer. And what are the health risks? I'm not going to get into the drug itself. Let me continue on forward.
Like an insane view. So you understand that not everyone who's trans has gender dysphoria, right?
I don't know where Parker got that information from. Because I've watched a few trans vloggers, videos on the subject. Gender dysphoria is, obviously a mental disorder. I'm not getting into, did we do it the wrong way? That's a whole other topic in of itself, because obviously, there's a lot of trans vloggers, and they're obviously way more successful than a random guy that just sits in his fucking room and has too many playlists in a fucking overly scattered channel that doesn't have really that many subscribers. So we're going to leave that one alone. Maybe if I stuck to one topic and sided with one political party or the other, then I might be more successful. Anyhow, let's continue.
What do you mean by everyone who's trans? What is a trans person?
Yeah, like a trans person would just be someone who has an incongruence between like their sex and what's designated as typically like as their sex through the context of their gender, because the gender is going to be their commitments in accordance with particular sets of social and cultural norms. They're typically associated with the sexes. Now, I don't think that like gender is defined in like a univocal sense. So like I don't think that there's like one term that applies in all cases. I think that we're going to use multiple different definitions. They're going to have conceptual overlap in all the different cases that we bring up, but like
Also,
there's like a
I wanted-
logically consistent social usage.
Also, I wanted to add this on here. You said that you essentially said that being trans is a mental illness. Can you name one major institution, medicine, or science that would consider being trans as a mental illness?
I mean, I'd have to take a look, but even if we were to say that, say, all of the major medical organizations didn't consider it a mental illness, I think anyone who's rational can recognize that a man who thinks he's a woman or a woman who thinks he's a man has a problem of the mind where they can't.
Exactly. It isn't normal, because if it was normal, there wouldn't be 8 billion people on the planet. And I don't think either one of these channels will exist. You see what I'm saying?
Actually conform their mind to what's real.
No,
Okay, so
actually,
the
I think
issue-
you're
Because wait, I don't think any of these people doing these channels will exist. This computer probably wouldn't exist.
The one the issue here, because I just described to you that they're just using language differently than you. So what you're doing is you're superimposing your language to mean what their language is. So
Yeah.
you're saying they're using a biological sense of the term man, right, or the term woman, when they're not using a biological sense of the term man or woman. So
Yeah.
actually the one that would be delusional here would be you, because you're self-prescribing an equivocation fallacy.
Yeah,
Okay,
like
so-
we could just replace those words with your definitions to see if they're true for a trans individual. So you just said a trans woman is a man that thinks they're a woman. By man you mean male, and by woman you mean female. Okay? So in other words, you're saying that a trans woman is a male that thinks they're a female.
Not in every case.
Now-
I can
Not in every case. That doesn't make any sense, but okay.
Now,
Can I
now
clarify?
Here's now here's the zinger. Trans women do not think they're female.
I just
Actually, I've seen a number of them that do.
said not in every case. Can I clarify then what I meant?
Of course.
Okay, so sometimes you can, and I had some debates last week on the trans issue. So I have talked to people who are transgender. So it's not always that they actually believe that they can become the opposite sex. In fact, sometimes, as you mentioned, oftentimes, possibly, they actually acknowledge that they can't become the opposite sex, but they believe that they can essentially put on a costume and make themselves appear more as the opposite gender because they have some discomfort in their biological sex. Is that not an accurate description of what trans people would typically go through? No? Okay,
No, I
what
wouldn't
would
say
you object to?
costume. Like, can I ask you a question? Like, do you think you using the term Hayden as your name is like costume?
Assuming that's his birth name, I would say no, because that's his fucking birth name. I don't know if it actually is. Because the birth name is a birth name. I mean, yeah, you can legally change your name, and many people, particularly those who are trans, who do. I have trans in my family. Goes by he now, went through the process of legally changing the name, from the birth name to the current name. So there's that process too.
No, that's
Why not?
because that's my actual name.
Because
Okay,
what
but
do you
that's a
mean by
socially
actual
constructed.
name there?
Real.
Yeah, it's socially
In
constructed.
reality.
Understand
Wait,
that.
okay.
Yeah,
well,
wait,
I mean,
so-
if your
so
name is in
socially-
reality, then gender identity is in reality because
Let me pause on that one. Gender identity. And this is where it gets a little gray. I mean, we only use gender when we're referring to humans. We don't use it for other animals.
both
Mhm.
names and gender identity would be relating to social constructs. In the same
this
way,
sense.
you believe that your name is indicative of a description of your sense of self, right? We believe that gender identity is indicative of a description and sense of self. And
Okay, so this raises the question. If a trans person doesn't have gender dysphoria, couldn't they be like a cross-dresser or a femboy? I don't know. This is all just confusing to me.
we deploy names, right, to yield a construct in society to understand one another, the same way we deploy gender identity as a construct in society to understand one another and to better understand ourselves.
Okay, so one question I asked last week when I had conversations like this that helped me better understand what the view was of the people I was engaging with was the question, what is a woman? It's not meant as a gotcha, but it does help me better understand what you guys are actually trying to get at when you say terms like women and gender identities. Can you guys just let me know what you think a woman is?
Yeah, of course. I actually told you earlier what I think, but I'll describe again
Okay.
because it doesn't seem like you heard what I said. So a woman would be an adult human person that's committed towards the social and cultural norms that are typically associated with the female sex.
That sounds like a very articulated sentence. Because again, when it comes to the human species, in the traditional sense, we refer to a man as a male human, refer to a woman as a female human, and we even break it down, to one of the kids, boy and a girl. That's the only time, in all other animal species, and not every animal species, falls under this, qualification, but, we use the common examples, a bull, is a male form of cattle. We'll stick to that. You know, a cow is a female version of that, of a type of cattle. Pigs, boar, a male pig, sow, a female pig. But, you know, obviously we don't split that up amongst, you know, babies of those species. Anyhow, let's move forward.
And I don't think that any of these terms that we would use to define what a woman is or what a man is are univocal, meaning that there's not one usage of a term that we would apply in all circumstances. There are going to be multiple different definitions that we operate and use in different circumstances, right? In order to be able to like apply that someone's a woman or apply that someone's a man in all circumstances that we would deem it to be the case. We're going to use multiple different definitions. So it's not univocal, right? There's multiple different senses that we use all the time. There's a biological sense of the term that makes sense. There's a sociological sense of the term that makes sense. It doesn't have to be necessary and sufficient.
Okay, so just a follow-up question on that to make sure that I kind of understand that better, or at least to the best of my ability here. If we both saw, me and you, Parker, were standing at the road at a crosswalk. We saw someone cross the street. You said a woman crossed the street. And what would make you say a woman there versus a man?
I've raised this point in my own videos. It's even in this fucking description. We go by visual cues.
Well, typically it would be like an assumption based on certain characteristics that we would typically associate with the sex.
So,
right. So, but like then I would clarify with them, and they'd be able to like clarify to me, oh, I have commitments with like to be in alignment with these particular traits as a prescription of my identity, and like that.
No offense, but I ain't asking fucking random people that. Now, if either one of them does that, you know, then they got more nads than I do. But I've said this before, you know, when we're all going through our day-to-day lives, we've probably crossed paths with at least one trans person, whether we're at the gas station getting gas for a car, supermarket, laundromat, cafe, Starbucks, doing our fucking daily routine in the hustle and bustle. We very well possibly have been, you know, within arm's reach of a trans person, not even realize it. You know, my reservation with, you know, Parker side is, you know, you throw on a dress and you say you're a woman and people just have to accept it. And, you know, that's just not how it works. You know, I don't know how tall any of these people are. I mean, you know, I'm 5'6", you know, so I'm not, so I'm under average for a man. But, you know, if someone who's like 6'2", you know, born male, decides to throw on a dress and high heels, walk into a woman's restroom, it's not going to work out well. So that's the point I want to make. I mean, you know, yes, there are some actual women who are, or biological females who are actually tall, you know. And I'm sure many of them probably got mistaken for trans, you know, but that's a whole other topic in of itself here.
That would make sense to me with that perspective. If I was possibly wrong.
So it's based on self-identity.
I just told you commitments towards social and cultural norms are typically associated with the female sex, but again, it's not univocal, so it doesn't apply in every single circumstance. There could be some circumstances where I would use a different definition to apply to a particular individual.
And so if there was a biological female who didn't identify as trans, but just wasn't committed to the norms of the female sex, was, say, for example, a tomboy, and was actually behaving more so like what would typically be male behavior than typical female behavior, would that person be a woman because that's what what their biological sex is and what they identify as, even though they don't fit the norms with the female sex? Or would they be a man because they actually would fit the norms associated with the male sex?
No, so again, if it depends on what their commitments are in accordance with, they have a desire to be in accordance with a particular set of traits as a prescription of identity. Within that case of like you'd said, quote unquote, tomboy, right? You understand in that case that they specifically have a desire to be in accordance with particular sets of social and cultural norms that are typically associated with the female sex as a prescription of their identity. And the traits that they have specifically associated with like the male sex, right, is not in alignment in terms of their identity, but rather like in terms of gender identity, but rather just particularly an expression of their gender.
So,
right? I don't think that it is the case that someone who is a man or is a woman has to always engage in particular behaviors that are typically associated with the sex.
that's a valid point. Okay, from Fox. That's a valid point. I mean, there's male nurses, nurse that's usually associated, as a woman's profession. There's female mechanics, and as mentioned earlier, when I'm talking about trans and military, there's female soldiers. That is a predominantly, a male occupation. Now, obviously, I'm pretty sure a lot of people are going to say they shouldn't even allow women in the military because other countries only allow men, but we don't live in those other countries. We live in the U.S. But anyhow, I will throw on a side note that when it comes to, emergency personnel, particularly law enforcement, even though, they're all wearing body cams and whatever, female officers and female emergency personnel, they're definitely a necessary. They're definitely a necessary factor. Oh my God, the police officer groped me, like the whole Me Too thing. So let's go forward.
And
Right,
Ashani, thank you for the $20 on PayPal. I appreciate you for the love, Ashani. W's for Ashani in the chat.
So a woman is someone who identifies as a woman then?
No, I just told you. It's again, a woman is an adult human person that has a commitment to be in accordance with a particular set of social and cultural norms that are typically associated with the female sex.
Okay, but here's the problem
That's it.
though. In the
And
case
again,
of,
I told you it's not univocal, so it's not going to be applicable in every single circumstance.
oh, so it's
Right, do you know what univocal
so it's
means?
just identity then, isn't it?
What are you talking about?
Because when I
Wait,
give
of
the
course we're talking about
example,
gender identity.
so when I give the example of the tomboy, right? That tomboy, she's a female and she's not committed to the norms associated with the female sex. So is she a man or a woman?
Wait. They are. When you say committed, they have a desire to be in accordance with those particular set of traits in terms of a prescription of their identity.
No. She's like, for example, in the case of biological female who isn't committed to the norms associated with the female sex, she just wants to live her
So are
life
they
and she happens.
non-binary?
Can you let me finish? She's not committed to the norms associated with the female sex. She just wants to be who she is. And who she is just happens, her personality tends to align more with the norms, the cultural norms of the male sex. Is she a man or a woman? Because by your definition, she'd be a woman. She would be a man.
What are their desires to be in accordance with the particular set of social and cultural norms in terms of a prescription identity? Which one?
She doesn't care. What for example,
they're non-binary? They're non-binary?
Can I add on a part here? I want to add on. So I feel like what you're offering to us is a little bit of an equivocation fallacy. The reason I say that is because you predicate this individual as a tomboy, right? While
He's just giving an example.
also denying any womanhood to this individual in the sense of alignment with social norms typical that of females. So the issue that we're seeing here is, let's just take a female, right, that aligns with none of the social norms, characteristics, categories, etc., typical that of the female sex, and aligns with many of that typically associated with the male sex. So we would expect this individual to self-identify as a trans man or non-binary.
That's not the case. And that's a reservation right there. Why would they expect somebody to do that when they're just a tomboy? You all know a tomboy. I'm Gen X. I've came across a few tomboys in my time. They identify as a woman, biologically, but they like to do male activity stuff. Now, let me actually see if Parker or Dean Withers has the same video on their channels. All right, just bear with me. Dean Withers. Let me search for that, because all right, let's go to videos, go to 4 months, because that's when that video was done. Just bear with me. I know I got to scroll because all three of these people are very, very serious YouTubers. And they're good at it. And they're all they're very good at what they do. Just like, yes, I smoke. Charlie Kirk was very good at what he did. Ben Shapiro is very good at what he does. Matt Walsh, very good at what he does. They did something right. So 4 months ago, I'm not actually seeing that one video. So I'm going to go 4 months ago. If I don't see it on this one, I'll check Pocket's channel, see if I see it on there. Okay, so I'm not seeing it on here, right? Type in Pocket get a job. See if I can find it on his channel. And we go to videos. And the reason why I like to follow all these, I wouldn't say follow, I just like to watch their videos because I got too much other shit going on to really follow anybody. Oh shit, he's got way more videos. Yeah, I'm gonna have to fucking do some real scrolling. Worker called to deploy his own family. Oh Jesus. So we can see if I can find it on his channel because clearly they were live streaming. Gets weird, all right. So I'm just trying to go back to 4 months ago because that's when Hayden's video was done. 3 months ago. 3 months ago. So once I get to 4 months ago, I probably could have typed in Hayden on this and I might have gotten a little quicker results, but whatever. All right, so those are all 4 months ago, 3 months ago, 4 months ago. Abortion been in all cases. So all right, here it goes. Here it goes. I guess Jubilee's another one of those channels. By his own argument live. You know, see, people are fucking, stupid sometimes. Like, they know they're being live. Their face is going viral. All right, so I'm not seeing that on either one of these channels. But they did all right. Hayden. Come on. All right, well, okay, so yeah, I'm not gonna it's probably somewhere in their live stream, so
Alrighty.
just
Alrighty. To give it a second for people to join up. What's good, everyone? Join up the live right now. How y'all doing?
all right, I'm not gonna bother finding it.
This is actually a logical fallacy created by the Parker Get a Job community called What About Bidenism? Trickle down.
If you step into Venezuela, those human rights don't apply. Or a different country. Or say you change.
Taking them over.
I'm 38.
Oh, look at this. Do you see how, like, in organization, know anyone in your life that has ever talked like that? $5. Matt, thank you so much for the $10. Bria with the $10. Justin with the $5. Sage with the that we should enforce the law. If you ever trespass, in our country at all, you should be held. This is actually a logical fallacy created by the Parker Get a Job. Yeah, I mean, he's gained more
He
than
doesn't
half.
have enough.
He's gained more than half of his net worth since he's become president. That with parents teaching their kids.
No, no, not that it's not wrong. Transgenderism, it's all more.
When it comes to weapons,
No, in terms of all funding.
Law firm.
Wait, so what was the lie?
Wait,
What was the
set
lie? Wait, what was the lie?
Land in order for you're not gonna like.
Eh.
That was me.
Right.
I was.
All right, I give up on finding this shit. Anyhow, so you get my point. It's a very complex issue. That definitely, in my opinion, definitely requires more understanding and definitely some research before we can just, blindly accept everything as if it's true. And, again, or there was another channel which I actually tried to call, The Line, who obviously, they like to debate, people who are transphobes. But they want to lump in all the intersex conditions. And clearly, my point is, my slight understanding of, the, sexist, intersex disorders, what I would call it, later in life, XY is usually a male. That was back in 2010, and it's now 2025. So it doesn't surprise me that, with further research, more discoveries get made. But, again, obviously the people who are on the right, they're completely, resistant to, they're just completely resistant. Like, it's almost as if they, they want to call it, they want to say, oh, it's bullshit science, and, science just generates results. You test a hypothesis, you conduct the experiment, and then you get the results. And, let's just say this experiment was to be carried out. We wait for the people identifying as trans to make a little money, and the intersex, just to see if there's some correlation between the two. They may very well be correlated. There may be mutations in the sex chromosomes that may be dictating that somebody identifies as a different gender than what they were born than what they were born as. I mean, obviously, the presented gender, at birth, like case in point, the two boxes for the Olympics, the so-called woke Olympics, they can, they had XY chromosomes. I believe they actually had the same condition. It was XY chromosome and the SRY gene, was in fact mutated. So when they were born, the doctor observed and put, sex, not gender, sex, female for both, because that's what they perceived. And both athletes, grew up in their youth, wherever they, one's from Algeria and one's from China, and they both wanted to compete in the Olympics. And obviously, yes, with a chromosomal mutation, you're going to see, you definitely saw some masculine features. At least with the one from Algeria, I think her name was, Amani Khalif. You definitely saw some masculine features. But because of the mutation, the bone structure, may have been very, very different from that of a male that developed properly. So if that was competing in the men's division, that one, let me phrase that. That sounds politically correct. If she were to be forced to compete in the men's division based on chromosomal karyotype, I'd put money on it that she would have gotten destroyed. Even though Olympic boxing is based more on points and not knocking the person out. Case in point, the trans man boxer, he won one fight, I think he lost his second fight within like 27 seconds. But anyhow, enough about that. So this is definitely a real issue, a real dividing issue, from the left and the right. Obviously, logic dictates that, let me phrase that. The right tends to focus more, logic, common sense, reality as, presented. Like I said, oh, there's a girl walking on the street. My visual cues told me that was a girl. I didn't think about it. My car is a Hyundai Santa Cruz. I don't have to think about it. And we saw what happened, if you watch my playlist, we saw what happened when I tried to identify it as a Jeep Wrangler or a Jeep Gladiator on a Jeep trail. It didn't work out that well. My Geo Tracker is a Geo Tracker. You know, and they go by VINs. You can't change that. I know I'm throwing in, non-living examples, but so you get my point. Visual cues. You read the make the make Hyundai. That's the company. Santa Cruz, the model. So you get my point. Visual cues. It's not a Ford Ranger. It's not a Toyota Tacoma. Trust me, I know. Watch that playlist. It definitely started looking like a Whistle and Diesel video. Anyhow, I'm getting ready to wind down for the night. But I hope you like the stream. Hope you like the channel, blah, blah, blah. I'm not expecting anything. I just post a video and then I just go about my daily routine. Anyhow. Both channels are actually very, very good. And there's some other ones that are also, very, very good, because they can actually sit and talk, and they're not cutting each other off. Anyhow, over and out. I'm going to go get something to eat. I'll talk to you.